I'm a location scout in Melbourne with a company called Real Locations, and we do location scouting and management for television commercials, dramas, and photo shoots. So we basically find places within Victoria for people to use in television commercials, whether they want it to look like the place it actually is or someplace different. Once we get the brief from a director or from a producer for the location that they're after, it's sort of a puzzle from there. You sit down and you try and think about places you either have been or have heard about within Melbourne or Victoria, places you may have driven past or a friend of yours maybe mentioned. So if the director's after a house built in the 60s or 70s, you sort of go, all right, try and pick a neighborhood where that sort of house lives, and then just drive up and down every street with a camera and a Melways, just figuring out where you are and trying to find that location. Probably one of the most interesting setups we did for the first telemovie of Underbelly, which was Tell Them Lucifer Was Here, was the actual crime scene where the police officers were shot. To recreate that, you have to do what the police did. You need to close off the road, set up crime scene tape, flashing lights, helicopter lights beaming down, or sort of fake that same action, whether that's a spotlight in a big cherry picker panning on the street, and they put in the sound effects afterwards. And what was sort of funny is we set up this scene, and in the script, or when it actually happened, it was late at night, it was raining, horrible weather. So we have to try and recreate that over the course of maybe 3 or 4 nights. So they've got rain machines and a water truck standing by to spray a 200-meter stretch of road on both sides and the footpath, make sure everything's wet and it looks as if it's raining. The owners of the actual building we filmed in front of were great. They came out and watched us fire off fake guns and that sort of thing. So it all depends on the person you're working with, as well as how great the location looks or how well it goes in terms of how successful the shoot is. Some of the other locations that we've sort of faked for Underbelly are the Essendon Airport. I think we used that as Melbourne in the 1970s. We used it as Sydney Airport, and a different part of it as an airport in Bangkok or Singapore. I think there's about 4 or 5 different airports that we use different corners or different angles of the same thing, and you just change the signage on the wall or the language that the sign's written in and sort of fake it a few different ways, which is great because it keeps the production in Melbourne and makes it easier to film, but gives you this completely different look on screen. So for some of the locations with Underbelly, they were the actual places like Pentridge Prison, which is half a new housing development now, a quarter derelict, and then I think there's a museum and a cafe. There's 2 or 3 cell blocks that haven't changed or they haven't developed yet, and we were able to use those for the shoot, which is great because some of the events actually in the third telemovie, The Man Who Got Away, actually did happen at Pentridge Prison. Whether or not they were the exact cells that we filmed in, or we picked the bigger ones because there's more room to put a camera and lights in than a 6x6 cell. It's just cool to see the actual places and to see that some of them are still around. Admittedly, some of the places we were in aren't exactly open to the public and had to be carefully arranged for the filming. But some of those places, again, you couldn't really build a set to get that same scale or to get the age in them. And actually what was cool at Pentridge is we've picked one part of the prison for the stuff that happened in the story at Pentridge. Another part was I think a Thai prison, or overseas prison. Another cell block was an interview room or a chaplain's office. So you use different parts of the same location and dress them slightly different, and it ends up being this completely different location on screen, which looks great. Finding a place is one thing, but then the organizing of it is a huge part of it as well. And with certain locations, that determines whether or not you'll be able to come back and film there again or use it for something else. So it's not just about the owner of where you're filming or the guy that's there on the day. It's about future jobs and the people around as well, because especially in some locations within the city, if the neighbor next door isn't happy with it or the shop down the street loses business because of it, it's going to make a big problem for you and for other film crews to work there. So besides scouting and finding these places, the public relations and the management of it's really important. Letting people in the area know what's going on, making sure that what's happening with the filming isn't interfering too much with something else, or being prepared to compensate that business for that inconvenience, and sort of anticipating that ahead of time. If you've got a car ad coming up and they want to close the whole street, get rid of all the cars that are parked there, you've got to go to every shop and just say, this is what we'd like to do, try and work out the best times to do it when it's the most convenient for the locations as well. So you've got a responsibility, obviously, to the producer and the director and the production company for that ad or for that show to make sure that works and the footage there looks as great as possible. But you also have to always keep in your mind, I might want to come back to this place later on, and if I piss everybody on the street off, it's not likely that they'll be too happy to see me again in the future.